Welcome back to Shasty Unchained. We are in a transition between two different worlds. And to the casual observer, to the guy just trying to get through his work week, endlessly scrolling his phone on his lunch break, the culture war looks like just another layer of background noise. Red team versus blue team. One more manufactured outrage cycle. One more election. One more angry headline designed to spike your cortisol and keep you clicking. We have been trained to treat politics like a sporting event that we're forced to watch. But if you look deeper, if you actually step back and observe the current of the water we are swimming in, you will see that this isn't a war of ideas at all. It is a war of foundations. Underneath all the political noise is a fight that is older, more dangerous, and incredibly personal. It is a war over what is real, what is good, and what a man is actually built for. My goal here today is simple: to equip you for the battle that is your life. Because make no mistake, brother, you are in a battle right now. It doesn't matter if you signed up for it. It doesn't matter if you want to be left alone, because the battle has come to your front door. We are living through the absolute sunset of the modern era. The structures that held our grandfathers upright, things like duty, faith, and a clear, unapologetic standard of what it meant to be a man, have been systematically dismantled. We were told by the culture that the deconstruction was a good thing. We were told it was liberation. We were promised that by removing the so-called oppressive weights of tradition, we would finally be free to fly. But as we cast off those weights, we did not begin to soar. We began to drift. Might even say we began to sink. Every man watching this right now has to know what I'm talking about. It feels like we're standing on a floor that used to be made of solid concrete, but now, suddenly, it bends and flexes under our feet. It's breaking, it's falling, it's failing. That feeling, that low-level anxiety, the quiet desperation, that sense of drifting through a life of endless consumption doesn't come from one bad law or one bad politician. It comes from living inside a society that has completely forgotten why it exists. Now, the guys who are like my age, around like 30, we share a very specific, very strange timeline. We were born into the exact moment that the old traditional world was taking its final breaths and a new postmodern mess was taking over. We didn't choose it. We didn't vote on it. We just opened our eyes and found ourselves standing in the rubble of what used to be a cohesive civilization. From the time we were kids, we were handed a broken map. We were raised in a culture that pushed us into a deeply materialistic and frankly heathen mindset. Now, when I say materialistic, I'm not just talking about wanting a nice truck or wanting to make a lot of money. Materialism is a philosophical worldview. It is the dark, depressing belief that the physical world, the atoms, the chemicals, the stuff you can touch and buy, is all that exists. It's the belief that you don't have a soul, that there is no spiritual reality, no creator, and therefore no ultimate transcendent meaning to anything you do. But if there is no higher purpose, then what is the point of life? Well, the culture gave us the answer. Just focus on yourself. The only logical goal in a materialistic world is to maximize your own pleasure and minimize your pain. So we played along. We participated in a culture that we didn't know was rigged against the masculine spirit from the very beginning. We chased the cheap dopamine. We consumed the entertainment. We bought the products, chased the women. We thought we were winning because we had zero responsibilities and endless distractions. But we were actually participating in the destruction of our own nature. Because the culture didn't just change the rules, they actively distorted what being a man even means. And to talk about this like men, and to figure out how we actually get out of this trap, we have to start with some brutal honesty about how we even got here. And you don't need a degree in history, psychology, or political science to understand this. You just need common sense and a willingness to look at and for the facts. How did we get to this self centered, secular, individualistic, nothing means anything mindset? Well, let me take you on a trip back to the middle of the 20th century. The year 1945 wasn't a boardroom meeting where some shadowy group of winners decided, let's erase absolute truth so we can have peace. History isn't a movie, it isn't that clean or tidy. What actually happened after World War II was a massive global trauma response. The leaders of the world had just watched civilization crack completely open. They saw what total war, absolute chaos, and a twisted totalitarian ideology could do. They looked at the ruins of Europe. They looked at the atomic bomb. They looked at millions of dead bodies, an entire generation of young men gone, and they panicked. Rightly so. They tried desperately to build a global safety net to keep the world from completely destroying itself. So they built massive institutions. The United Nations was founded in 1945 with the explicit, stated, mission to save future generations from war. They built a financial order at Bretton Woods to stabilize currency and prevent the kind of economic chaos that helped feed the catastrophe in the first place. Now, I won't get too heavy into that rabbit hole, but I will say that there was a silent trade off in that deal. By focusing entirely on global economic stability, these institutions effectively reimagined the human person as a unit of consumption. The goal wasn't just to keep the world safe, it was to keep the world managed. They didn't need men with souls and deep convictions. Those men are hard to control, they're hard to feed a narrative. They needed consumers with credit scores and predictable habits. They drafted a global rights statement, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, claiming that human beings are born free and equal in dignity. Sounds nice. And at the time, that wasn't a bad thing. That wasn't a philosophy of nothing means anything. It was a moral attempt to stop the bleeding of the war. They were building guardrails on a very dangerous mountain road. But here's the pivot. Here's the fatal flaw in that design, and it is the exact place where our modern crisis begins. When you build a world entirely around guardrails, around safety procedures, institutions, treaties, and risk management, you can successfully manage the physics of the road. You can keep the car from going off the cliff. But guardrails have zero authority over the heart of the driver. A guardrail can stop your car from hitting the ravine, but it can't tell you why your life is worth saving in the first place. It can't tell you what's waiting for you on the end of the trip. And it sure as hell can't give you a moral reason why I shouldn't frickin' run the guy off the road in front of me because I'm in a hurry and he's in my way. I mean, I need to get there. A guardrail manages the crash, but it doesn't manage the soul. A society that refuses to answer the heavy questions, questions like, what is absolute truth? Or what is the purpose of human life? Will still have to value something because nature abhors a vacuum. So society replaced the big, heavy questions with smaller, cheaper ones. It started asking, what is efficient? What is safe? What is permitted? Those aren't evil questions per se. You want a safe bridge, you want an efficient economy. But if safety, efficiency, and permission become the highest questions in a man's life, his soul starves to death because you were not built just to be safe. You were not built to just be an efficient gear in a corporate machine. And Jonathan Peugeot would say that this is the inevitable disaster that occurs when we place secondary things over primary things, when we value the margins over the center. Think about a city. You have the temple and the town square at the center. That's the purpose, the reason people gathered there in the first place. And then you have the walls at the margin, the safety measures, right? Meant to protect the people at the center. Walls are good. You need the walls. We need the walls. But the post-war world has performed a hollow magic trick. It has dragged the walls into the center and left the town square empty. We are now a civilization that worships the walls. We are obsessed with the skin of the fruit while the fruit itself has rotted away. When you make the margin the center, the world turns inside out. It's inverted. You end up with a life that is perfectly managed, perfectly safe, perfectly efficient, but has absolutely no point. You optimize the how, but you've murdered the why. And as Pajot warns, when the center is empty, the margins don't just protect you, they eventually
crush you.
Now look at the intellectual bloodstream of the culture after those world wars. Because people were so terrified of dictators and tyrannical authority, there was a massive overcorrection. The warning against totalitarianism was necessary medicine, but medicine becomes an addiction if you keep taking it after the wound is closed and it's time to start walking again. The anti-authoritarian instinct gradually hardened into a cultural reflex. The message broadcasted through our schools, our universities, and our media became,
all standards are just power plays.
All traditions are just cages.
Down with the patriarchy.
All claims of absolute truth are just attempts to dominate you.
This is the exact definition of the postmodern mind. If you've never understood what that term means, postmodern, let me simplify it for you. The postmodern mind is the arrogant belief that nothing is objectively true. It is the idea that morality, family, gender, and duty are just made-up social constructs. It tells you that there is no final court of appeal beyond a group's rules, the collective opinion, or an individual's personal taste. That's a big problem. Coupled with that is the secular or neutral mind. This is the idea that society should have no sacred center. God is pushed entirely out of the room, and everything becomes relative. You have your truth, and I have mine. What a joke, dude. What a joke. Because listen, when you train an entire generation of young men to see every standard, every tradition, and every rule as a scam designed to control them, you don't get liberated men. You get suspicion. You get self-perceived noble rebels. You get a generation of guys who know exactly how to critique the world, how to make a sarcastic meme, how to tear things down, how to manipulate, and how to spot a flaw. But they have absolutely no idea how to build a real life of meaning. It's like teaching a man how to perfectly critique the architecture of a house, but never teaching him how to swing a hammer. When the storm comes, his critiques won't keep the rain off his or his family's heads. And this is where the culture declared a silent, psychological war on you as a man. Think about the masculine spirit, the raw, aggressive, protective, building, conquering spirit of men. True masculinity does not fit into a perfectly safe, sterilized, neutered, consumer-driven square box. Masculinity is inherently about outward duty. It is about sacrificing your own comfort to protect others. It is about carrying heavy things and imposing order on chaos. This is how God wired you. But a postmodern, self-centered culture doesn't want protectors or builders or leaders. It wants compliant consumers and political votes. So they distorted what it meant to be a man. They pathologized our very nature. They took the natural aggression, the drive to build, and the desire to conquer that exists inside every healthy boy, and they labeled it toxic. They told us that to be a good man in the modern world, you essentially need to act like a very well-behaved woman. You need to sit still, be quiet, get in touch with your feelings, never offend anyone, and consume the products they sell you, and you damn well better not have an opinion about anything regarding a woman, otherwise you're a bigot. Because what happens to a man when you remove his North Star? Strip him of his duties as a protector and provider. and then tell him that his deep, burning hunger for meaning is just a chemical reaction in his brain? What if you taught him that his very nature was the problem? What happens? I'll tell you what happens. He drifts. He turns his masculine energy inward and begins to rot. When a man isn't allowed to conquer the real world, he conquers digital worlds in video games. If he isn't allowed to pursue real, meaningful risks, he gambles his paycheck on sports apps. If he is told that traditional marriage and raising a family are just patriarchal traps, he opts out of real relationships entirely and numbs his natural God given desires with an endless stream of internet porn or an endless line of broken relationships. And, gentlemen, the drift isn't just a sad feeling in your gut, it has numbers. It has a brutal, undeniable body count. And unfortunately, for those who like to deny truth, the numbers do not lie. Just look around at the battlefield we find ourselves in. In America today, religious affiliation has declined sharply. Pew's major surveys show huge generational gaps in practice and identity. In plain terms, fewer and fewer men are being trained from childhood to live inside a thick, meaningful story of duty, worship, repentance, and belonging. They are being raised on nothing but Wi-Fi and a vague sense that they should be nice. Look at relationships. Recent data shows that over 40% of adults ages 25 to 39 are completely unpartnered, and men under 40 are far more likely than women their age to be single. I'm single, and I'm 33, so I fall into this category too. We have millions of men in the absolute prime of their lives, the exact years where their grandfathers were building stable households, raising children, and putting down roots. And instead, these men are floating around their apartments without a single anchor. And the culture is doing nothing to help. On the contrary. Now we add the third piece, isolation. We are the most digitally connected generation in human history, yet we have never been more alone. The US Surgeon General recently had to issue a blunt advisory warning that the total lack of deep friendships is literally killing us. Lacking social connection is tied to a massively higher risk of early death. The health impacts of modern loneliness are compared to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. This isn't soft, touchy-feely psychology, bro. This is mortality.
Finish him!
When you tell a man, you are your own project, define yourself, make your own meaning, build your own truth, but you strip away his church, you detach him from marriage through complete de-incentivization, tell him to leave his family, and you isolate him from a brotherhood of other men, what you end up building is not freedom. You've built a vacuum with Wi-Fi. And I want to ask you something. What does a man's nervous system do when his soul's starving to death? His mind is confused, and his body is totally isolated. It numbs the pain. This is what addiction actually is. And let's be perfectly exact. Addiction is a chronic, relapsing disorder. It is a compulsive seeking and continued use despite massive harm. And I'm not bringing this up as a moral excuse to let anyone off the hook. I am describing the reality of the battlefield we are standing on, and that I have lived for over a decade. Now, the CDC estimates that we are losing around 80,000 Americans every single year due to drug overdoses. It remains the leading cause of deaths for adults right in our age bracket, 18 to 44. 33 people that I personally knew are gone, and only from my area, and I stopped counting and hearing about it years ago. It seemed like every month there was a new name on the list, and it's still heartbreaking to think about. I had to stop looking for these names. Dude, I had to stop looking for it. The weight was becoming too heavy, and I wasn't even right myself. In suicide, men commit suicide at about 4 times the rate of women. We make up nearly 80% of suicides, and for guys aged 25 to 44, suicide is the second leading cause of death. The second leading cause of death. It's crazy, man. I need you to let that sink in. That's not some people out there in the news. Those are our brothers. These are guys we went to high school with. These are our fucking people, bro. So tell me again, is the main problem in America is that people just need more freedom and rights? Or is the main problem that men are dying violently in the prime of their life because they don't have a patch of solid ground to stand on? The culture, the media, the politicians, they call this a drug problem or a mental health crisis. But often it's a meaning problem, wearing a chemical mask. We are trying to treat a spiritual gunshot wound with a pharmaceutical band-aid. And the wild thing is, modern science is finally catching up to what the ancient saints and the sober men in AA have always known. A recent massive meta-analysis of rigorous longitudinal studies found that spirituality and religious involvement were consistently associated with a significantly lower risk of harmful drug and alcohol use. And for alcohol recovery, the Cochrane summary reports high certainty evidence that 12-step facilitation programs aimed at increasing AA participation lead to higher continuous abstinence rates than most any other active clinical treatment. Do you hear what that means? It means the hard data completely destroys the modern lie. The modern lie says you heal by focusing entirely on yourself, looking inward and detaching from authority and tradition. But the truth, backed by reality, says people heal through belonging. They heal through truth-telling. They heal through disciplined practice, submitting to a higher power and finding a community that loves them too much to let them negotiate with their own self-deception, something we desperately need. Now we have to talk about rights and standards for a moment, because if we don't understand this, we will never rebuild. If there is no transcendent anchor, if there is no God, then moral language structurally collapses into desire language. In American political memory, the Declaration of Independence says men are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. That sentence is doing massive philosophical work. It grounds your dignity and your rights outside the state and outside the raw human appetite. And you can debate the history of that foundation all you want, but you cannot pretend that the foundations don't matter. Because if there is no creator, then rights are only what the strong decide to enforce. Morality becomes nothing more than a war of wills, a kingdom of thrones. Modern moral philosophy even has a name for this collapse: Emotivism. Emotivism is the view that moral judgments are just expressions of your feelings rather than statements of fact. It's the idea that saying stealing is wrong, murder is wrong, is no different than saying, I don't like broccoli. But when a culture trains people to treat morality as just a personal preference, don't be shocked when raw power becomes the final referee. Your personal preferences don't stop a fist to the face. Your inner opinions don't stop a tyrant. Only a higher law does. So, how do we get out of this postmodern mess? How do we stop the drift? How do we reclaim the masculine spirit and bring men back toward family, tradition, and meaning? It starts with something the modern world is absolutely terrified of: inner silence. Inner silence. We live in the loudest, most distracted era in human history. From the second you wake up to the second you go to sleep, algorithms, marketers, and politicians are pumping noise into your brain. Your phone is a slot machine. It's a slot machine designed to keep you in a constant state of low-level anxiety and cheap dopamine. And don't get it twisted, this noise is by design. It keeps you weak. A man who cannot sit in silence alone with his own thoughts is a man who can be controlled by anyone. Inner silence is the exact place where true strength is bred. Silence forces you to face reality. It forces you to look at the man in the mirror without the chemical mask, without the distractions, and without the excuses. It is in the quiet that you realize you are not the center of the universe. It is in the quiet that you figure out where you are failing, where you need to repent, and what your mission actually is. If you want to rebuild your life, you must unplug from the digital illusion. You must learn to be completely still, alone with your thoughts, so you can actually hear the truth again. So you can remember what your own voice even sounds like. And from that silence, you return to tradition. You return to the family. And for the last 40 years, the culture has mocked the traditional family. They made the father out to be a bumbling idiot in every sitcom. They told you that getting married and having kids was the end of your fun, the end of your freedom. True freedom isn't the ability to go to clubs, sleep with ran-through women, and blow your paycheck on useless garbage. That's just a different kind of cage, man. True freedom is being able to look in the mirror with absolute integrity and not flinch or look away in disgust. A family is the ultimate anchor. Being a father, being a husband, being a provider. That is the forge that burns away your selfishness and turns you into a man of iron. It forces you to carry weight. It forces you to live for a future that outlasts your own life. And listen, I say this to you as a man who doesn't have a family of my own yet. I'm standing on the outside looking in, and when I see men with beautiful families, families they take for granted, it saddens me on a level I can't even describe. Because, brother, you are so rich. Forget what the world tells you. Forget what the hustle culture tells you. I've had the money and I've had the status and I've chased women and drugs, and I'm telling you, none of it, not a single bit of it, can even come close to the fulfillment a man feels when he fulfills his duty as a father with integrity. Nothing fills me with more envy than seeing that. To see the love and safety his family feels just by being in his presence. That's the goal, man. That is the peak of the mountain. And I just wish you guys would wake up and see how wealthy you really are. I wish you'd take more of an active role in molding your children, because that's exactly what you're doing. You are a father. You are a sculptor. Every action you take, every word you speak, every time you choose your family over your own selfish desires, you are chiseling their souls into the people they will become. And conversely, every time you choose to buy weed instead of saving that money for whatever, you're choosing that over the future of your children. The solution to the chaos we are in is not going back to some cartoon black and white television version of the 1950s. We cannot time travel. The solution is going down, digging all the way down to the very bedrock. And that bedrock is Jesus Christ. He is the Logos, the governing principle of reality, the truth himself. And I'm not talking about using religion as an aesthetic accessory to look cool on the internet. I am not talking about using faith as a political mascot for your favorite candidate. I am talking about submitting to him as Lord in your life, the foundation that does not move when the culture shifts. When you submit to the Logos, you are aligning your life with the blueprint of reality. St. Augustine pointed out something profound that most people miss. The dimensions God gave for the ark, 300 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high, are the exact proportions of a human body lying prostrate. The ark is man. There are 3 specific ratios here that define your structural integrity. The 6-1 ratio, the length to the breadth. This is your stability. It's the length of your character that keeps you from capsizing when the cultural winds shift. The 10-1 ratio, the length to height. This is your balance. It's the depth of your soul that ensures the waves of modern chaos don't roll you over. And the 5-3 ratio, the breadth to the height. This is your symmetry. It is the internal alignment of your heart and your mind. Augustine's point was that the ark was built in the ratio of the human body, because the body of a man is meant to be a vessel of salvation. You are the ark. If your life isn't built to these proportions, if you are shallow where you should be deep, or narrow where you should be broad, You will never survive the flood. Submitting to Christ means checking your ratios. It means going into the silence to seal the leaks according to the divine proportions. Because the flood isn't coming, it's already here. And if you aren't built according to the Logos, you are just a piece of driftwood waiting to be swept away into the tides of the culture. Now, if you're listening to this right now and thinking, man, this is just too religious for an intellectual podcast, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, I challenge you to consider the alternative. The alternative is already here as well. It is the world you walk through every single day. A society that is richer than any previous generation, more connected digitally than any time in human history, and yet utterly flooded with loneliness, overdoses, and suicide. Evolution. The secular postmodern experiment has been run, and the results are in. It is a meat grinder for the human soul. So here is the practical blueprint for taking your life back that any religious or secular man can employ. It is simple, it is brutal, but it is incredibly hopeful. First, you must reject the cult of endless destruction in your own life. Critique is not a home. Skepticism is not a father. Sarcasm and irony are not a foundation. Pointing out the flaws in everyone else's life doesn't make you a man. Fixing your own life does. Reject the passive, modern mindset that says nothing matters. Stop being a critic and start making the choice today to be a builder. Second, rebuild the standard where you actually have authority. You might not be able to fix Washington, D.C. You might not be able to fix the culture at large, yet. But you have a domain now. Rebuild the standard in your own body. Rebuild it in your habits. Rebuild it in your home, your work, and your relationships. Lead them, not as a dictator demanding to be served, not as a tyrant using domination, but as a servant leader taking extreme sacrificial responsibility for the people around him. And third, become the shore for other men. Because people don't climb out of the void through arguments alone. Men do not logic their way out of hell. You can't just send a depressed man a podcast and think he's just gonna get better right then. They climb out by attaching themselves to something solid. A brother who actually shows up. A rule of life. And a community that tells the hard truth without cruelty, or maybe you're like me and you actually need a hard ass to completely destroy your worldview with no remorse. I needed that. Now, you need to find those men, accept the criticism, and more importantly, you need to be that man for someone else. Talk about it, be about it. And if you want to take a single sentence to carry out of this today, let it be this. The next age of human history will be built either on the terrifying void of human will or on essential truth. There is no middle ground anymore. You don't get to vote from the sidelines. You are already building the future by the way you choose to live right now. Stand firm, not in your fleeting opinions and feelings. Stand firm in reality. And if you're Christian, you know exactly what that means. It means repentance. It means obedience. And it means the slow, hard, and glorious work of becoming a man who can carry weight without breaking, who can carry his own cross without breaking.